Hey everybody, Casey here with Life Abstract Gaming, and this week I want to talk about the Netflix original show, Marvel's The Punisher.
I'm looking for Frank Castle.
The Punisher?
I think you know about my case.
Castle's the last witness. We can either clean this up or let him take us down.
They killed my family to get to me.
You have nothing but a war inside you.
You're gonna pay. The world needs to see the truth.
The character first appeared in The Amazing Spider-Man number 129 in 1974. In all of that time, very little has actually changed about his origins and methodology. Francis Castiglione was a war veteran and U.S. Marine whose family was murdered by the Mafia. He becomes a vigilante to seek vengeance on the crime syndicate, taking on the name Frank Castle, and due to his exceedingly violent and ruthless methods, he becomes known as the Punisher. The Punisher is one of the few characters on the side of good that has no issue with killing. He regularly employs questionably immoral practices like torture in order to get the job done, making him one of the earliest anti-heroes in the genre. The character has always been one of the more popular non-mainstream heroes. He's had 3 live-action movies in 1989, 2004, and 2008, all of which were separate iterations, and is now being portrayed a 4th time by Jon Bernthal from The Walking Dead in his first TV series. As the latest Marvel original series, I would have said The Punisher had a lot to live up to, since there was such a high quality bar up until Iron Fist and The Defenders. But it's kind of funny how those 2 shows have the awful Danny Rand and the Hand characters in common, which seem to drag down any other story they get included in. If you remember, Daredevil Season 2 is where the Punisher character was first introduced into the series, and his arc was my personal highlight, but once his story was mostly done and the Hand was still left to be dealt with, the show took a pretty steep nosedive in terms of interest. Now that the Punisher returns in a solo series, it has the benefit of being more focused, as well as having slightly lowered expectations due to the last 2 shows in that universe. From this point forward, I'm going to start diving into specific events and themes from the show, so if you haven't finished it yet and care, you can consider this your spoiler warning. The series takes place a good while after the events of Daredevil Season 2. It's not expressly stated, but due to the shared universe, I think it's safe to assume that the story is months after the events of the Defender series as well. I came to that conclusion thanks to the appearance of Karen Page, played by Deborah Ann Woll, who serves as the only character link to the rest of the Netflix shows. This was the first thing I appreciated about The Punisher. Before now, the character every series had in common was Rosario Dawson's Claire Temple. It was cool at first to see her in Daredevil and then have her pop up in Jessica Jones, but it started to get tiring by the time Iron Fist rolled around because of how deeply she was involved in every show. Karen taking on that role for the Punisher definitely reset the counter, and I wouldn't mind if it was a different character every time in other shows going forward. With Frank and Karen being the only characters we've seen before, the new faces are extremely welcome. I want to highlight Amber Rose Riva as Dina Madani, who did an excellent job being both hard-nosed and vulnerable. Her character was put through so much emotionally over the course of the series, and I believed every bit of her performance. I also really loved the conversations between her and her mother, which reminded me of Overwatch for some completely unknown reason. I mean, who knows really? I also want to bring attention to Daniel Weber's character Lewis, who portrayed the epitome of a tortured soul. I've never done military service, and I can't even pretend to understand what post-traumatic stress of that magnitude can do to a person. But thanks to the excellent writing of that character, I can at least have it shown to me. I felt so sorry for his ordeal, but also really came to hate him as he slowly became a terrorist. He wasn't a senseless force of evil, he was very right to feel the way he did, but he couldn't have been more wrong about his plans to correct the problems. That duality of doing the wrong things for the right reasons perfectly encapsulates Frank Castle, and by extension several other main characters. The show spends a lengthy amount of time telling you in various ways that Lewis and Frank are both doing the same thing. They're both taking their vengeance to the extreme after being profoundly wronged, and once the comparison is made, you really can't undo the fact that there's some truth there. The line even begins to blur once it's brought to light that there's so much more behind the murder of Frank's family. The same government that let down Lewis actively turned against Frank. The high-level government conspiracy stuff, I admit, was a little hard to follow at times, but I feel it made sense overall, and it was interesting to keep figuring out just how much more there was behind the scenes of events we thought were over and done with. This may actually sound like a weird comparison, but I can't shake the idea that this series may have gotten a lot of inspiration from another Netflix show, Stranger Things. One of the most satisfying parts of that show is when all the different groups of characters who are separately piecing together parts of a mystery finally link up and share that information. This exact trope happens in The Punisher, and is just as satisfying with the reasoning for the delay of information being based on trust, which is completely understandable due to the nature of government secrets and such. If there's anything at all I have to say was a negative for the show, was that it dragged out its finale. Just about every plot point was neatly wrapped up in the second to last episode except for Billy Russo getting away. The final episode is just about the final showdown between Frank and Billy. It even drags their mutual friend Curtis back into a second hostage situation, which just made me feel really bad for the guy. Now, I appreciate the climax of their fight where Frank spares Billy's life, but not before brutally disfiguring his face on broken glass. It perfectly sets up Billy's future as the villain Jigsaw, but I just felt like some of this could have been condensed into the episode before it. Overall, I really loved The Punisher. It stayed so true to the character but made him incredibly relevant by diving into hot-button themes of today. Terrorism, gun control, veteran affairs, there's so much here, and I don't think it's a stretch to label it as the best Marvel series to date. So, what did you think of Marvel's The Punisher? Did you like the highly politicized themes, or would you prefer shows like this focus on just more action? Let us know. We're listening.